My name is Hannah, and this is my beauty budget. Hi guys, hi! It has been a long time since I filmed because I pre-filmed a bunch in preparation for a visit from my friend Jenna last weekend. We actually filmed an episode of My Beautiful Friend. It probably won't go up for another month, I would say. Those tend to take kind of a long time to edit and I have to find a place to fit it in. But I pre-filmed in advance of her visit for the weekend, and then before she even arrived, I realized that there were things that I needed to post this past week, and I had to get them done before she was there because I couldn't film while she was here, if that makes sense. So I pre-filmed, I did a big session, and then I did another big pre-filming session all over a week ago, and I've just been editing those videos and putting them up, which isn't usually what I do. I usually kind of film, edit. I maybe do 2 at a time, half the time, but it's mostly just 1 at a time. So I feel simultaneously a bit out of practice and also somewhat refreshed. I think that for all of the different types of projects that we do in life, even if they are the projects that we love to do the most, it's good to take a break from time to time. But I feel like I have so much to tell you. I keep thinking of things that I want to say that are completely irrelevant to this video, and this is not the proper video in which to say any of them because this video is always packed with very specific information. So I'm going to nip it. I'm not going to tell you any of the things that I want to tell you that have happened since I last filmed. I will share them in my check-in, which I'll be filming right after this, and that will be the video that goes up next after this one. For now, let's go ahead and get into the meat of the video. This is going to be the video in which I divulge all of the information that I've uncovered about the companies from which I purchased anything with my budget back in April. So I know it seems like I'm really behind, and I do feel quite behind, but this is how it happened. Usually, I report at the beginning of one month about how I spent the previous month's budget. So at the beginning of May, I filmed a video where I talked about all the things that I spent my budget on in April. And that has been up for a long time. I'll actually link it in the cards right now. And then I usually wait a couple of weeks and I do my research, and it's at the end of that month that I filmed the video where I talk about the research I've done on those companies. Even though April was 2 months ago because it's now June, really I'm just like a week late with this video, if that makes sense. I would like to start filming this video closer to the beginning of the month. I think I've said that before. I'll try to do it this month. All right, let's start. This is always kind of a long video. This one doesn't seem like it should be that long of a one because I feel like April was the month in which I did the best at buying fewer, nicer things. So the list of things that I actually purchased in April is shorter than it has been for any of the other months, but I do think that there are a couple of extraneous items of sort of housekeeping and logistics to do with this project that I need to touch on in this video, so I'm worried that it's going to go on and on. Let's start. So I'm going to throw up on the screen the first spreadsheet, which is the one that shows the things that I purchased, how much they cost, and it also lists the companies from which I purchased these things. And this is the part of the spreadsheet where I keep track of how much of my money went to the company and how much of my money went to the retailer. So in this case, I purchased 2 tops from Aritzia. Aritzia is both the company and the retailer. You can see it's the third one down on the list. So the tops together cost $70 and Aritzia received the whole $70. It's all rolled together in that one. Right below that, you can see I bought a Makeup Forever concealer from Sephora. I'm estimating that Makeup Forever received about half of the cost of that item and that Sephora received about half. That's from some research that I did about what percentage Sephora takes of its sales back in the beginning of the year. So the concealer was $28 and I'm estimating that Makeup Forever received $14 and Sephora received $14, and this is the part of the spreadsheet where I keep track of that. So based on what's on the screen right now, you can have a quick look at the things that I purchased and about how much money went where. But of course, I talked more specifically about each of these items individually back when I had first purchased them back at the beginning of May. And so I'm not going to go into detail or review any of these items. This is just about how much money was spent at each company. So just like last month, I'm actually going to go through in chronological order. I was going through in alphabetical order for a while, and the second spreadsheet now has so many companies on it that when I organize it in chronological order, there are so many of them, it's hard to comb through and figure out which ones I want to talk about and find the ones that I want to talk about. So for now, I've just taken all of the companies that I purchased from for the first time in April and put them at the bottom of the spreadsheet all together, and I'm going to go through them in chronological order. There are 2 companies that got some of my money in April that I had purchased from before. One is Aritzia and one is Sephora. We just talked about both of them, and I will flash up on the screen the information that I uncovered about those companies back when I first discussed them when it comes time. So going through in chronological order, the first thing that I purchased back in April was this little earring on my top cartilage piercing. So I had my cartilage pierced twice, but I was at an event where everyone was getting 1 free piercing. And because I wanted 2, the woman who was doing the piercing asked that I pay, not her because she was being paid by the event to be there, but that I just pay for the piece of jewelry. So this little top piece of jewelry is worth $35, or that's what she sells it for in her shop, and so that's what I paid. She is an independent small business owner. She runs a little piercing shop called Karma Beverly Hills, and I have no idea where the piece of jewelry came from. Like, it wasn't branded, it's just what she carries in her store. So there's some opacity when it comes to figuring out the provenance of this piece of jewelry. I was really only able to report on Karma Beverly Hills from what I know about them, and so I decided to just say that Karma Beverly Hills got the whole $35, although I'm sure that she purchased this piece of jewelry from somewhere else. But I'm kind of considering it to be a materials fee, if that makes sense. So when I say that Makeup Forever got some of my money because I bought a concealer from them, I'm saying that they got all of my money, and I'm not taking into account the fact that they purchased the component from someone and they purchased the pigment from someone. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not trying to trace 2 degrees removed where all of my money went, although I'm thinking about the ethics of the sourcing of those components and I'm finding out about it as much as I can. In this case, I'm just considering Karma Beverly Hills to be the equivalent of Makeup Forever, the company that makes the thing, makes the piercings, and I'm considering this piece of jewelry to be materials in the way that pigment would be for Makeup Forever. I hope that's clear. So I will put my second spreadsheet up on the screen with the row for Karma Beverly Hills highlighted. This is a totally independent piercing operation, and I feel amazing about giving her some of my money. I don't know a lot about the details of it. I was able to say that it's independently owned and it's minority owned, it's woman owned, the company. I don't really know anything about the manufacturing of this earring, so I gave question marks to these humanely manufactured, ethically sourced, eco-conscious questions. I gave her a green X for product inclusivity because there is no exclusivity when it comes to who can get pierced and who it's appropriate for, and the vibe of the shop was very come one, come all. And I also gave an X for it being vegan. I mean, I can't really see a way in which piercing or the component of a piercing would not be vegan. It's a little bit absurd. It's almost like it doesn't apply, but I just checked it anyway when I was going through. All of the red X's seem irrelevant. There could be a question of this potentially having been made in a sweatshop, again, because I have no idea. So I gave that a question mark there. For the most part, there's not a lot that I can really know. Karma Piercing ended up with 4 good marks, 0 bad marks, and 4 question marks. So it represents the fact that there's a lot that I don't know, but I feel really amazing about supporting this woman in her small business. And even though there's potentially some lack of clarity about the earring that's actually currently in my ear, to me, it was all good. And I was happy to fork over my $35 when I got this piercing. I feel like the way that I'm talking about this brings up a thing that I've been thinking about in prepping for this video, and I haven't filmed one of these in a long time. Obviously, this is only the April one, so this is only the 4th one I've ever filmed, and it's been quite a long gap since I filmed the other one. I've just been thinking a lot about the relativity of ethics and the fact that in many cases it's very personal. There are some things that I balk at buying because I just feel a little bit icky about it. And there are other things that I know there's bad stuff behind the scenes, but I don't balk at buying. I feel like I should give an example. One brief example, and God help me, I'm already going off on a tangent even though I've only talked about one business so far. I have gone to Zara a couple of times since the beginning of the year and kind of tried to shop. And I know that there are a lot of mixed ethics when it comes to clothing manufacture behind some of the clothing that I have purchased, like the pack of underwear that I purchased from Costco, et cetera, et cetera. I think that the pack of underwear that I purchased from Costco back in January or February is probably just as prone to have come from a sweatshop, if not more, than anything that I might buy at Zara. I might have been better off ethically buying underwear at Zara, but I did it when I was there at Costco, and I thought about it and I reported on it, and I was like, yeah, this is a little bit shady. Every time I've been at Zara, I feel like there's sort of a pane of glass between me and the clothing. And even as beautiful and as editorial and as perfect for me and as well priced as a thing might be, it's like my joy or my excitement, and in many cases sort of my willingness to buy that thing, is just dead in me. And I'll be holding it, I've tried stuff on, I've loved the way it looks, and there's just this deadness when it comes to the excitement. And I think it's just because I associate Zara so strongly, not only with potentially unethical manufacturing, but with like the sweatshop industrial complex and the way that it gets sold to us, all wrapped up in the allure of fashion. And I think for me, my unexcitement or my unwillingness, and I'm not saying that I'll never shop at Zara again. I'm just saying, because I kind of tried. Like I tried partly because I used to love shopping there, and part of me wants that excitement back. Like I want to love things. I want to have joy. So there was this joy that used to be in my life that's been removed, and I keep going back and seeing if I can get it back because I'm kind of curious. I'm just curious about all of this stuff. And also because I think it would be really interesting to report on Zara in this project. But I think it's 3 times now that I've been there, and I just can't get it up for Zara anymore, because the thing about the sweatshop industrial complex and the veneer of edgy fashion kind of, it sits so badly with me that it killed the joy. Whereas the sort of depressing underwear at Costco that I purchased because I desperately needed underwear and I was sort of just settling for it, and I felt like I couldn't spend a very big chunk of my budget on it, so I just got this kind of unexciting pack. Like that feels a little bit more like, well, I kind of know that this isn't the best, but it's sort of the best I can do right now, or it's what I'm choosing to do. It just feels a little bit more transparent, even though it is no less part of that world or part of that issue, and may even be more of an issue. Because I know that many shops like Zara, and Zara may also be doing this, are starting to make more of an effort at sustainability and ethical manufacture now that it's an issue that's coming more to light. I don't know, because I haven't done very much in-depth research into Zara, because I've just been researching the companies from which I've been purchasing stuff. Maybe I should just do it on the side out of curiosity, and maybe what I uncover will make me more excited to shop there or less excited to shop there. I don't know. I will report back actually if I do that. But this is just to say that I feel like, gosh, this is a long tangent. This is going to be a long video, you guys. And it's maybe partly because I haven't filmed in a long time and I'm feeling chatty. I think that you can research what you want to research. You can make lists. You can declare that you're going to do this and not do that, or that you're just going to try to gather information like I am. But when it comes down to it, ethics are really a matter of gut. That's why I feel so passionate about getting the information, because if you have all the information, then you can allow your gut to do its work and to tell you if what you want to do, what your brain or your impulses feel like you want to buy, if that's right to you or wrong to you, if it's right for you or wrong for you. And I really am passionate about letting the gut decide in that way, and not letting other people decide, not letting rumors decide, not letting what's currently considered to be PC decide. I really believe in letting the gut decide, but that's why it's important to gather your own information, and that's why I'm doing this. And I just find it really interesting that in this case, for example, with the piercing, my gut tells me that this was $35 purely well spent, even though there's a lot that I don't know about this earring itself. I care more about supporting this small woman-owned business than I do about where this earring might have come from before that, because I'm very passionate about that. I'm really passionate about supporting female business owners and supporting women who are sort of sole proprietors of a very small business. And so I'm willing, and my gut tells me yes. All right, I feel like I've literally already filmed a whole video, but that was just the beginning. Let's talk about a very messy and interesting situation that has come up in this project. So if you saw my video about what I purchased in April, you will have seen that I purchased a dress from an Etsy seller in China. And when I reported on that, I said that it was a small business, that I had purchased it from a seamstress, that it was handmade, and that it was made to order for me, because that's what it says on her Etsy shop. Now, I've since gone back and I've looked at the shop, and there's actually very little information in this one little shop. The shop is called Hodu Story. It's just one of many Etsy shops selling kind of interesting, unusual clothing. There are a bunch of similar shops that are also based in China that have a lot more information on the shop page. And I had been looking at a bunch of them. I had been choosing among a bunch of different dresses from a bunch of different shops. And the other ones that I had been looking at all say in their shop description, we have a very small shop. There are 4 of us. We make everything by hand. The designer graduated from design school and chose to branch out independently instead of going in to work for a larger corporation. I mean, they're explicit about the situation, and they're explicit about the fact that it is independent design. This shop that I actually ended up purchasing from doesn't have anything like that on her website. And I think that when I was skipping among them and choosing which dress to purchase, I was sort of assuming that they were all generally the same, that it was all generally the same situation. I was eliding what I thought I knew about the situation of all of these companies, the ethics of all these companies together. And I sort of felt like I was just shopping from independent designers in China, and that they just all were part of the same network, kind of. It turns out, though, that the one that I ended up purchasing isn't actually making the clothes herself. And I found this out because one of you looked at the picture that I had posted, or the link, went to the link and then image searched that dress and found it on AliExpress. Thank you so much for doing that research and for letting me know that the dress that I thought I had purchased from the designer that I thought she had made with her own hands, actually she purchased from AliExpress and resold on Etsy under the guise of being one of these small independent handmade dressmakers that I had also been shopping around on Etsy. So first of all, sad, gross, disappointing, and I love the dress. I'm frustrated that I sort of had the wool pulled over my eyes in this situation, especially as I'm trying to be conscientious about these kinds of things. And I just didn't know that there was more research to be done before purchasing in this particular situation. I thought I knew what I was buying. So that's very interesting. But also, this has become an extremely complex part of this investigation, because this seller ostensibly purchased this dress either from AliExpress, or more likely, I think, from the seller who's also selling on AliExpress, or from the same source as that seller. Now, I looked it up, I found it on AliExpress, and I found that it's by a company called Jon Nature. So I have to assume that Jon Nature, they are the manufacturers of this clothing. They seem to be. Now, I'm not sure of anything to do with this dress, but they pretty clearly seem to be kind of the place the dress came from, and they are selling on AliExpress. So I assume that this company, Jon Nature, who made the dress, received some of the funds, some of the money that I paid, because this seller on Etsy had purchased it from that company. Then Hodu Story, the Etsy seller, she received the majority of what I spent on the dress, and then Etsy received a small cut, because when you sell on Etsy, Etsy takes a cut. So for this one dress, I'm accounting for 3 companies having received some of my money, and I've researched all 3 companies. I have no idea what the breakdown is in terms of money. I just took a stab in the dark, and I'm saying that Jon Nature, the makers of the dress, maybe sold it for something like $15, and then Hodu Story sold it to me for $40, and Etsy received probably about $5 of that $40. So that's what I'm going with. So let's talk about Jon Nature first. And I will leave the link to the AliExpress shop of Jon Nature down below. They have a brand story up on there, but it's not very informative, especially in terms of what I'm interested in. And AliExpress, by the way, I didn't look into them because, again, I'm assuming that the Etsy seller bought the dress from Jon Nature, from the supplier, and not actually from AliExpress. But you know, it's like it's a little sister of Alibaba, which is just a huge online retailer. So Jon Nature is a Chinese brand. It was founded in 1998, and that's kind of all that I could find out. There's only information about them on AliExpress, and they talk a lot about how the clothing is fluid and it works for everyone, which is good, and I recorded that in my spreadsheet. But there's really very little information. I mean, they also talk about how they make clothing out of natural fibers, which is what I was looking for. That's why I ended up with the dress. Linen, cotton, breathable, natural, things like that. But it's just very opaque. There was almost nothing that I could uncover about Jon Nature. And when I searched, you know, who owns Jon Nature, nothing came up the way that it does when you search who owns Makeup Forever or who owns Sephora. There's just almost nothing about it on the internet. So I wrote in my notes that based on the low prices, I can only assume that corners are being cut somewhere in terms of ethics. And this is another kind of messy thing that I sort of wanted to bring up in this video. I make clothes for a living. I have a small independent company. I make clothes by hand, one piece at a time, and I sell them to tango dancers. That's my main source of income. And I know how long it takes to make a thing. And I also know the cost of linen, like natural fibers. And I know that if you're closer to the source, or if you're in a place where it's more abundant, it doesn't cost as much. For example, it's much less expensive to buy fabrics in the fabric district in downtown LA, which is where I live and work, because this is the heart of that industry. So you can find things for lower prices than you can if you're shopping at, for example, a fabric shop in a small town in middle America. But even then, even if Hodu's story were actually hand making these dresses, and if the person at that Etsy shop were somehow getting an incredible deal on linen, like $1 a yard or something, even then, like that's the only situation in which I can kind of imagine the $40 price tag being ethical, like paying for, and I think that, and that's not the case, obviously, right? She's not making the clothes herself, and I don't think that she's acquiring, or anyone is acquiring, that linen at $1 a yard. So how are clothes ever that cheap? How can a linen dress be $40? How can a t-shirt in H&M be $2? It's because someone's not being paid for their labor. And I'm just starting to think more about the fact that clothing specifically, if it drops below a certain price, but this is true of a lot of things, but clothing specifically, I know because I do it, right? I know how long it takes. I know the labor involved. I know the cost of materials. I myself have a rubric for calculating the cost of making something plus the materials and the overhead of running the business, and projecting how much it should then cost, an ethical price. And my clothes cost a lot more than $40. Even the ones that don't take that long to make, even if I make it pretty speedily and it doesn't use too much fabric, even then, using the proper rubric to make sure that I get paid and Joe gets paid and our business gets covered, and we are just squeaking along on a shoestring, so it's not like we're making a massive profit, we're just trying to sell things at a fair price. Even then, they start at well above $40. They start at kind of like $80, $85 for things that I think probably don't take as much material or as long to make as this dress probably did. In many cases, if you find a piece of clothing at an amazing price, you can be pretty sure that the reason it is that price is that there's an ethical issue. And in some cases, maybe there is a company that you know has done its best, that is pretty ethical, and something goes on sale and then on sale again, and you get it at a really great price compared to its original price. That's different. I'm not talking about sort of bargain hunting or getting really lucky or happening to find something way on sale, or the company just trying to cut its losses and you know, they sell it for less than it's actually worth. That's different. I'm talking about when something's initial price is just absurdly low. I kind of lost perspective about that when I was browsing, because I'm trying so hard not to overspend, and I really wanted a dress, but I didn't want to spend half my budget on it. And so I kind of got sucked in. I was like, this is amazing, this is a great price, I'm so excited, and I found this little shop and they make things by hand and they're willing to sell it to me for $40, I'll take it. When I think about it, I know that that's not a fair price. But I think that many of us, especially in the Western world, have lost perspective about what a fair price is, because we see clothes everywhere. And I get this all the time, actually. I'll be selling a skirt at a tango, I'll be vending at a tango festival, I'll have my skirts out. The prices of my skirts range from, $85 up through to $250. Some of them, if they have a ton of silk in them and they took a really long time to make, they can be that costly. And I've seen women come over and look at a skirt and be like, $100 for a skirt? Who do you think you are? No one has ever looked me in the eye and said, who do you think you are? But I've heard people saying that to their friends, like mumbling, looking through and grumbling, just being like, this is ridiculous. These prices are ridiculous. Like, who would pay this much for a skirt? And the reason that, I would never do this, but sometimes in those moments I want to go to that woman and be like, well, what do you think is a fair price for a skirt? And where has that idea come from? Do you think that $10 or $20 is a fair price for a skirt? And do you think that because you can go to the mall and buy a skirt for $20 at a fast fashion shop? And if that's where you're learning about pricing from, then you're learning about pricing from a system that doesn't pay its workers. Let's get back on task. So I'm looking at the spreadsheet filled out for Jon Nature. I have no idea who owns them. I gave them a question mark for being independently owned. I did give them a green X for being minority owned. Now, as a Chinese brand that's operating in China, assuming that it's owned by someone Chinese, that person is not a minority in China. So it's not minority owned in China. But I decided to give them a green X anyway, because I, as a white person who's come up through the system in America with all of the privileges that my whiteness affords, I feel good about giving some of my budget to someone who's not white, even if that person isn't American. I just feel like it's a distribution of wealth issue, it's a distribution of privilege issue. Anytime there's a brand owner or a worker or anybody who's not white, and that person is on the receiving end of some of my money through the act of me purchasing goods, I consider that to be a boost in the ethics of that purchase. So I gave them a green X. Question marks across the board for eco-consciousness, humane manufacturing, ethically sourced materials. Product inclusivity, green X, because Jon Nature, the dresses, and also the dresses on Hodu Story and in a lot of the Etsy shops I was looking at, they pride themselves on being size inclusive. So the designs, it's not just that you can buy it in a bunch of different sizes, which you can for many of them, but it's that the designs themselves are made to be flattering and accommodating for a bunch of different body types, which I think is really cool. There's also diversity in advertising. It's kind of the same as the question of whether the brand is minority owned. So all of the imagery on this Etsy shop and also on the Jon Nature shop is of Chinese women modeling these pieces of clothing. So again, it's not diversity in advertising in China because there isn't diversity on the website, meaning the models are all of the same ethnicity. And in China, that's not a minority. But again, I, as a shopper, looking at imagery, consuming imagery, deciding what imagery triggers my desire and what I want to emulate, I think that it's powerful for me to look at someone who doesn't look like me and who doesn't come from where I come from, wearing a piece of clothing, and for me to be like, that's incredibly beautiful. I love the look of that. That's fashion, that's quality. I want to be connected to that. I want to emulate that. It creates a bridge across the division of being from a different country, the division of looking different, of having different colored skin, etc. So for me as a consumer, I consider that to be a kind of diversity in advertising or diversity in imagery on the website. And so I gave them a green X for that. I hope that makes sense. And I'm also interested to know what you guys feel about this, because it's funny, my criteria made so much sense at the beginning of the year when I laid them out. I was like, product inclusivity, diversity in advertising, blah, blah, blah. And now that I'm getting into the nitty gritty, it's not always that straightforward. And I'm having to make these kind of fuzzy calls about what side of the line things fall on. But I gave them a green X for that. No idea about charitable giving, veganism, corporations, ecological impact, sweatshops, employee mistreatment, no idea. Tons of question marks for this brand. So they have 3 good marks, 0 bad marks, and 9 question marks. For some reason I wrote 11 in the spreadsheet, so that must be what you guys are going to see on the screen, but it's 9. There's 9 question marks. All right, let's talk about Etsy. I'm going to try to power through the rest of these because I know that this video, I think I've already been recording for like an hour. So Etsy as a company, and you guys I think all know what Etsy is. It's an online platform for independent sellers to sell things, and you can sell handmade things and you can sell vintage things as long as they're older than 20 years on Etsy. So Etsy is publicly traded or publicly owned, and this brings me to another tangent on which I planned to go in this video. I will try to keep it short. I've been struggling a bit in these videos to talk about ownership because I have this column for whether something is 1% owned. And the reason I put that there, as I've said many times, is that I want to distinguish between brand owners who really do need the purchases and do need the income from their businesses to survive, and brand owners who are just already rich and getting richer from their brand. Not that I think that I don't want to buy from brands that are created by people who are already rich and getting richer from their brand. I'm not saying that that's an immoral way to be or that those brands are immoral. I just want to know. I'm just gathering the information. So I had that column there, but it's been really tricky kind of figuring out who owns brands and whether something is independently owned, a mega corporation, 1% owned, all of this stuff. So after my last video of this nature, I received an email from a subscriber, Grace. Thank you so much, Grace, for reaching out. And she knows a lot more about this stuff than I do. So I wanted to share a little bit of what she said because it provides some clarity. It doesn't help clarify this part of my project because it just shows how kind of murky and how much more complicated this is than what I'm able to keep track of, but it's interesting. When something isn't indie, Grace is saying there's a difference between privately held and publicly held companies. So a company can be not really indie, but privately held. I think that's kind of what she's saying. And if the company is publicly held, she says there are important ways in which the founder or the CEO doesn't really own the company anymore. And I think when I research, when I look up who owns Sephora, right, and it comes up as being something that's publicly traded, like NASDAQ, like it's on the stock market, you can buy stocks in it or you can invest in it. I believe that is what she means by publicly held. Anyway, she's saying that Jeff Bezos, who owns Amazon, he only owns about 17% of Amazon. And she gives Costco as a really good example. So Costco employees, I'm reading directly from Grace's email, Costco employees collectively own almost 5% of Costco stock, whereas the insiders, the founders and CEOs, etc., own closer to 1% combined. 74% of Costco's stock is owned by institutional investors, public pension plans, retirees, unions, etc. And there's nowhere on my spreadsheet for me to distinguish between whether non-indie companies are publicly traded or private. And Grace also says it may be worth considering whether the main investors are institutional, like the real public, people with retirement savings, etc., or are the main investors hedge funds, which are basically just other rich people, like rich people getting richer. And not only, I mean, I think that for some of these companies, there is a way to know, like I could do that research, but that's far beyond my ability, my knowledge base, and also time-wise. I just don't have the time, and I don't really have the ability to build a spreadsheet that complicated, nor is that what I was hoping to do with this project. I just kind of wanted to get a general idea of things. So to me, I feel like this information and hearing from Grace has undermined a bit my call even more. I mean, there have been discussions about it in the comments, and I know that my 1% owned and my mega corporation columns are contentious and confusing. I know. And I think that at some point I might take 1% owned out of the like not make it red. I don't have time to do it right now, but I may go through at some point and keep the information because I want the information so that I can extract some percentages from this spreadsheet, but knock off the red mark from the companies if they happen to be 1% owned, because I don't have any idea whether they're publicly traded or privately traded and who's investing in them and how much the owners, even if they are part of the 1%, are actually getting of the money that's spent at this point. The majority of the money that anyone spends on Etsy goes to individuals, individual craftspeople or individual resellers of vintage goods. So to me, that's more to the point, that even though Etsy is making millions of dollars itself, when I spend something, it's only a fraction of that that's going to contribute to those millions. And this is just to say that I consider buying from Etsy to be highly ethical. I feel like I'm buying from an individual. And I like supporting Etsy as a corporation or as a company because they provide a platform for that kind of ethical shopping. And I'm into that. Full disclosure, I started my business on Etsy. When I first started making tango clothes back in like 2009, and I decided I wanted to sell them because people kept asking to buy them, I knew about Etsy already, and that's how I launched it. And I sold on Etsy for years. Years of my life, I made my main income from selling on Etsy. And I have to say that if Etsy had not existed at that time, I'm not sure that I would have known how to get my brand off the ground. And I might not even have ever really started it. Or if I had, I don't know if I would have been able to grow it. And I don't know if I would have been able to make it into what it is today. I'm a huge fan of Etsy, and I always feel like it's a more ethical option if there's something that I want to search Etsy first. It's hard to apply most of the spreadsheet questions to Etsy because it's a platform. So the question of whether there's like humane manufacturing, I mean, yes, I feel like almost anything you buy from Etsy, especially if you know you're buying from an independent craftsperson, is humanely manufactured. But Etsy itself isn't a manufacturer, so it's not really relevant. I gave them an X for product inclusivity, diversity, and advertising, and then I gave them an X for anything else cool on the radar, just because I think generally it's cool. And then I gave them an X for being 1% owned, but as I discussed previously, that column has gotten extremely messy. So they ended up with 3 green and 1 red and 0 question marks. But my feelings about how ethical Etsy is just represent so much more than this. It's an example of the way in which my spreadsheet kind of fails. So I don't feel like I necessarily need to talk about Hodu Story, the Etsy seller that pulled the wool over my eyes about the dress, for very long, because I've sort of been touching on it this whole time. It's an Etsy shop that claims to sell handmade, made-to-order clothing, but is actually reselling other manufacturers' clothing. There's no way to tell how the clothes are made from Hodu Story, and even when I started to do research, there was no way to tell. It says handmade and made to order right on the listing, so that's a lie, and that really sucks. I don't know who owns Hodu Story. I did give them a green X for being minority owned, again, because it's based in China. I assume that the owner is Chinese, the same reason that I gave the X to Jon Nature for that, the green X. Nothing about manufacturing that I can uncover. I gave them a lot of the same green X's they did for Jon Nature because it was the same dress, right? So I purchased this size inclusive dress. There was diversity in advertising to me, right? I was shopping on a site that wasn't only featuring white people when I was shopping in the Hodu Story Etsy shop, so they got a green X for that. And then it's just question marks all across the board, but I gave them a red X for anything else bad on the radar because, come on, I mean, what a garbage thing to be doing. So they ended up, again, it's like the spreadsheet really doesn't tell the whole tale. They ended up with 3 good marks, 1 bad mark, and 6 question marks. Oh, you know what? We should talk about Aritzia because they're not going to show up down here because they were both the retailer and the company. So I'll throw up quickly on the screen the section of the spreadsheet that talks about Aritzia. I talked about them at length in another video, but you can at least see that they have 6 good marks, 2 bad marks, and 3 question marks. I feel the same way that I did before about Aritzia, which is just that they're making a good faith effort at sustainability and ethics. And when it comes to the purchase of clothing, I definitely feel much better about shopping there than I would shopping somewhere like Zara. And that is partly reflected in the prices. To make a beautiful wool sweater, for example, and to source the wool ethically and to have it spun ethically and knitted together and sewn together in a factory where you pay the workers a fair wage, and then to have it transported across the world and to make sure that everybody is being taken care of who does any kind of work anywhere along the supply chain. That sweater should cost $70 or $115, and especially if you're like paying your employees well in the sales rooms and all this stuff. I mean, like how can it happen that that sweater would only cost $20 or $25? It can't. So it makes sense to me. I'm like, if I'm going to buy something really beautiful, it's two tops. So it was a cotton t-shirt and a cotton or a rayon little tank that ties at the waist. It was two little summer tops. And yeah, same with those things. I think if I'm going to buy two little tops like that, you know, if I bought each of them for $5 at H&M, I would know just based on the price that someone wasn't getting paid. So buying those two tops for $70, which seems like a lot to me, thinking about what I'm thinking about here in this project, it seems just right. And it sucks to be like wanting to pay more for stuff, especially when you're shopping on a budget like I am. But it also encourages the quality over quantity mentality, which I'm trying my hardest to institute in my life. And I think that it helps to think of quality as not only having to do with the quality of the materials and the quality of the product, but its provenance as well. So I purchased my Makeup Forever concealer at Sephora. I'll do the same thing with Sephora right now. I'll throw it up on the screen. I'll show you the way that I filled the spreadsheet out for Sephora originally, which is that it got 2 good marks, 3 bad marks, and 1 question mark. The other $14 went to Makeup Forever when I purchased that concealer. Makeup Forever is owned by LVMH, which is the same luxury conglomerate that owns Sephora. So they have pretty much the same situation in a lot of ways. And I gave them question marks for a bunch of issues of manufacturing. It's very difficult to find out how cosmetics are manufactured. But, you know, I was recently having a conversation with one of the founders of Refer Brushes. It's 3 engineers, and they just wanted to get into some kind of commerce that they were passionate about. And they visited the little tiny town in Japan where Hakuhodo brushes are made. It's like the town where brush making as a craft has been handed down for generations, and really the best brushes in the world are made there. And they fell in love with brushes, just the idea of brush making, and they decided to manufacture makeup brushes, and they're having them manufactured in those same factories in that same town. But because they're doing a Kickstarter type thing where you can pre-order, they're able to keep the prices down, which is really amazing. And they also aren't doing traditional advertising. So they don't have affiliate codes. They're not doing kind of influencer marketing in that way. They're just getting in touch with influencers and sending some PR. So they sent me some brushes. They're absolutely amazing. And I think that their Kickstarter's launching on the 10th. Would that be tomorrow when this goes up? I think it'll be tomorrow. So I'll link that down below as well, but the link probably won't work until tomorrow. I really, really, really respect this brand. I think that, speaking of ethical brands, this is a brand that is really doing it right. And I'm proud. I'm not affiliated with them like monetarily because they don't do that, but I'm proud to be affiliated with them just as a person. I'm proud to know them. And I was talking with Tom, who's one of the brand owners, when he was here in LA last. We got together for coffee, and that was when I learned all of what I know about their relationship with these amazing artisan factories and the way that they're having the brushes made. And he told me that when they were trying to figure out what they wanted to make, they toured a bunch of factories all around the world. And I asked about makeup factories because I was like, I'm so curious about whether makeup can ever be considered to be like made in sweatshops and how you find that out. And he brought up the fact that makeup is often, it's automated. So clothing factories, whether they're sweatshops or not, tend to be packed with people who are doing the work. Whereas in makeup, it's more likely to just be packed with machines and very few people. So perhaps less likely to be something you can consider a sweatshop. And that was kind of enlightening for me. I was like, Tom, you're right. Just interesting. I still don't know if Makeup Forever, for example, can be considered a humanely manufactured brand, or if my concealer could be considered humanely manufactured, or if the pigments are ethically sourced. It's just, there's a lot of opacity surrounding that. I did give Makeup Forever an X for product inclusivity and diversity in advertising. They're really pretty good about that. I gave them a red X for mega corporation, 1% owned, and then I also gave them a red X because they sell in China. So many in the cruelty-free community don't consider Makeup Forever to be cruelty-free. They don't actively themselves test on animals, but you know the drill. If they're on the shelves in China, presumably the products are prone to be pulled and tested on animals at the whims of the government, and then the company Makeup Forever is required to pay for that testing. So they ended up with 2 good marks, 3 bad marks, and 5 question marks. Kind of standard for like an LVMH brand. Cover FX, which is next, however, has a very different footprint, a very different story. Cobra Products was founded by 2 women, Lee Graff and Jenny Frankel. Lee Graff is still the president, I believe, of Cobra FX. Jenny Frankel, who came up through working at MAC and is Canadian, by the way. So Jenny Frankel and Lee Graff got together and they started Cobra FX together. Jenny Frankel has since sold majority stake in her share to private equity investors. That happened all the way back in 2011. Jenny Frankel went on to found another company with her 2 daughters, and that company is Nudestix. I think that one of them is still in college and one of them may be just out of college. Those like young business owners of Nudestix, they are the daughters of one of the founders of Cobra FX, and that's why they had the money and the wherewithal and the business acumen to start Nudestix. They were born with a silver lipstick in their mouths. Now, I didn't purchase anything from Nudestix, so I didn't deeply investigate that company, and this video is too long as it is, but I did want to mention, because it's relevant to the contents of this video, that another thing you might have heard about those 2 girls who are the founders of Nudestix is that they are apparently Trump fans. They're Canadian, so they're not American voters. And when I looked it up, I read a bunch of Reddit threads about it, and there's confusion about why a Canadian would be into Trump and like where that mentality would come from, and whether you can consider them to be Trump supporters or promoters or whatever it is. There is a photograph of them wearing Make America Great Again hats, standing in front of Trump Tower on vacation. And it's from Instagram. I have it. I'll put it on the screen right here. And you can see that the one of them who posted it said, "Trump is making our vacation great again," or something like that. So they're fans. I mean, I think that's the best way to put it. They are publicly fans of this guy. And I don't know where that comes from. I mean, I find it hard to understand where that would come from. And I guess if you're born really, really wealthy and white, and your family's relatively conservative and values business acumen or bravado, then maybe I could see you turning into like a high schooler or college girl who owns a makeup business and thinks Donald Trump is cool. And in order to imagine that, in order to imagine how that could happen, I'm really drawing on like the deepest depths of my ability to empathize and my creativity and sort of my projection of the way that maybe people can grow and develop and what people value. I think for me and for a lot of people that I know and have talked to, the fact that there can be so much widespread support for Donald Trump is mystifying, because it's really hard. It's hard for me to understand how someone could ignore all that is bad. And it's not just bad. I mean, bad is like the mild word, but all that is deeply, like horrifically troubling about, let's just say, like what he's said, what he has publicly said, taking away even like the policies that he's instituted and all of that, just like the things he's been quoted as saying, the things he's said about women, the way that he treats people, the way he sees people, the way he behaves around people. I mean, like, I don't understand how anyone can be a fan of that. So it's really complicated. And again, like I'm all about empathy. I'm all about trying to understand how people can believe what they believe and be passionate about what they're passionate about, especially if it's really different from me. So I've done a lot of work since the 2016 election to try to understand like why someone would vote that way and why someone would be a fan. I don't just want to reject it as if it's like insanity. I want to understand it because it's our world. It's the world we live in. And it's these girls who started this company, who are passionate about makeup and who have made some amazing products. And I mean, I want to understand. I'm going to go into this more in the next video of this nature because it's going to continue to come up. But I just wanted to mention that these girls are the daughter of Jenny Frankel, who's a co-owner of, or was a co-founder of Cover FX, although she's not really in that role anymore. She's not a co-owner anymore. And again, when I try to understand how they could have ended up in those MAGA hats in front of the Trump Hotel, taking an Instagram picture and being excited about it, my first thought is to think of family, that it must be the ethos of the family, and their mother is connected to Cover FX, and Cover FX is the brand that I'm investigating, and that's why it's relevant to this video. So the last thing I'll say about Cover FX is that in my research, there were many indications that they're making an effort at sustainability and cleanliness of ingredients. So the reputation of Cobra Products seems to be that they have a little bit more of a finger in the ethical pie than a brand like Makeup Forever, for example. It seems like they're trying with their components and the sourcing of their materials and stuff like that. The people who are developing the products in the labs, they're thinking about ethics. So I'm kind of into that. I mean, not kind of, I'm into that. And I was glad to read that. Let's look at the spreadsheet. So Cover FX got a green X for being minority owned because of having been founded by 2 women. And one of those women is still currently the president. I do believe that it's now a publicly held, like a publicly traded company, like I was talking about with Etsy, but I think it's fair to give them a green X in that case. I gave them a green X for being eco-conscious because I read a lot about that. Not a ton of super concrete proof, but at least there was something out there about that. And at this point, that's good enough for me with this project. No sense of the manufacturing. I mean, some sense that they're making an effort, but again, nothing really concrete. I got them a green X for product inclusivity and diversity in advertising. That they are amazing at that, similar to Makeup Forever. And they have a green X for being vegan. I did read somewhere that I think that there's 1 or maybe 2 products that aren't vegan in their line, but everything else is. And those might have been discontinued at this point because there are other places where I read that everything was vegan. So most, if not all, of what Cover FX makes is vegan. And that's cool because I think this is the first mainstream makeup brand that I've come across that's pretty much vegan. So they got an X for being 1% owned, but again, messy. And then I gave them an X for anything else bad on the radar just because of the things that I just talked about, just because I think that, I think it's bad to me. Like it's bad to me that one of the co-founders of Cover FX raised 2 daughters who celebrate, or at least at the time of that photograph, celebrated Donald Trump. So 5 good marks, 2 bad marks, and 2 question marks for Cover FX. They come out pretty well ahead in terms of this spreadsheet for a makeup brand that's in Sephora. So the last thing on the list is that I purchased 2 plants. So I purchased these plants at the plant warehouse in downtown Los Angeles. Luckily for me, I live close enough to the flower district where you can buy plants at wholesale prices that I can go buy plants at wholesale prices there. And it's also lucky for me because it means I'm pretty much buying them direct from the people who raised the plants. So I purchased these plants from, I believe it was like Rudy's Plant Shop, I think is the name of the guy. And I bought them from Rudy, and Rudy was like, here's how you take care of these plants. I mean, it couldn't be more clear that it's a small, independent, immigrant-owned business, and that it was like a direct wholesale interaction. I mean, it's not technically wholesale because I'm not then reselling the plants, but you get what I'm saying. Independently owned, yes. Minority owned, yes. No sense of like manufacture, because here's the thing, I don't know how eco-friendly the greenhouses or the fields or the plant shops are. I don't know if they use a bunch of chemicals, because agriculture is a thing that can really negatively impact the environment, and I just don't know. I didn't think to ask, which is lesson learned for me. I gave them a green X for anything else cool on the radar, and they didn't get any red X's. I gave them a question mark for unchecked ecological impact. Anything else cool on the radar, just because it's so sweet. It's just so sweet. It's the loveliest little plant vendor in this absolutely lovely warehouse full of plant vendors. And it's, you know, people who work really hard making their living in this industry. And I like being part of that, and I like being able to buy from the source in this case. So Rudy's plant shop ended up with 3 good marks, 0 bad marks, and 4 question marks, a lot of question marks because of the issue of ecological impact of these plants. But in spite of that, overall, I feel really good about this purchase. I'm so happy to give my money to this guy and his family and this little business. As always, I end this video feeling a little bit of anxiety. It's hard to talk about these types of issues on the internet, and it's even harder to do it when I feel like I don't have a very clear stance on a lot of these things. I'm just feeling my way. I again want to reiterate, as I have every time, and as I especially did when I started this project, that I'm not claiming to be the bastion of morality or like shining a light on the way to be an ethical consumer. I'm not even conducting a project this year of trying to be an ethical consumer. I'm just trying to track where my money goes after I buy whatever I feel like buying. So I'm not trying to appear like holier than thou or anything like that. And I'm just learning. I'm just trying to learn. And I think it can be really uncomfortable, as I've said, to dwell in the gray area, and there's a lot of gray area in this video. In any case, thank you guys so much for watching this one. I can't wait to hear what you have to say down below. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you are remembering to take extra good care of yourself right now so that you can be the most effective version of yourself as you do your work.